As the fifth season of Bungo Stray Dogs is wrapped up, I felt it was necessary to give my input on a jarring part of the narrative that has mostly been overlooked. While I myself am not a massive fan of the show, I do appreciate the bits that make it worthwhile. The introduction of Saigiku Jouno, one of the major antagonists in the series, was initially something that made Bungo Stray Dogs worthwhile. However, I felt that his character was dealt with horribly in Season 5. Of course, spoilers for Seasons 4 and 5 are going to be ahead, so watch at your own discretion. Jouno initially appears to be the most calm and rational of the hunting dogs. He speaks in a cool, phlegmatic tone that is deceptively friendly and keeps a fine smile throughout most of the scenes he's in. Despite his demeanor, his sadistic and psychopathic nature are revealed underneath the facade of rationality and kindness. While these traits in themselves are not unique to him, he nevertheless portrays them in a more realistic and interesting way as opposed to the other characters. For example, he's very straightforward with his desires as shown here.
私はどちらでもいいんですよ。探偵者が悪人であろうとなかろうと。私はただ法の名のもとに人を傷つけ追い詰め破滅する音を聞きたいのです。ありえ、あんたみたいのが警察？探偵者をかばうなら君も容疑者です。君も私の楽しみの一部になりますか？
While Jouno was neither the smartest nor most complex, he ultimately was a great character because he was the most realistic villain. He fit his role as an accompaniment to the main villains very well, almost too well. Jouno is a pure evil villain who perfectly represents the idea of power and terror. He almost reminds me of Hans Landa in Inglourious Basterds, as both have an immense amount of power over the people around them and, at least in my eyes, steal the show when they're on the screen. In addition, both are pretty manipulative and cunning characters who put on a facade of kindness to deceive those around them, especially those who have a lower position or less power than they do. Moreover, while Jouno is not the strongest character either, he is capable and can hold himself well in a fight, as shown when he fought the detective agency in Season 4. In contrast to the other characters in Bungo Stray Dogs who are constantly fighting and put in dangerous situations, Jouno rarely ever fights. Rather, he uses his cunning intellect to gain situational advantages over his enemies while not seeming ridiculous and cartoonish. For example, he was one of the few characters to ever catch Daze off guard. While one can argue that Daze was expecting to be arrested, he was still surprised by Jouno and was stripped of any power he had in that situation. This is odd for Daze, considering that he usually thinks of every possibility, but this just proves that Jouno's boldness and cunning are a volatile threat, even against the smartest or greatest of enemies. Another layer to Jouno's power is his political power and authority over the people around him. Because he's an officer of the hunting dogs, his judgment is the law, and thus anything he does is legal and justifiable. For instance, Jouno ordered a group of bank robbers to kill themselves with his own sword in the hopes that they would be spared. Obviously, in most legal jurisdictions, this would be a major crime, even for an officer of the law to commit. However, in Jouno's case, he's able to get away with it because of his immensely high authority and ability to act on his own. This juxtaposes most other characters in the show or in media as a whole. Most heroes have to abide by laws or at least legal or ethical standards, meanwhile villains have to circumnavigate the law in one way or another. Meanwhile, Jouno is essentially the law, which makes his actions and his authority that much more compelling and terrifying. Overall, despite his relatively small screen time, Saigiku Jouno was able to establish himself as a compelling pure evil villain who was a terrifying force to be reckoned with. He had a good balance of physical strength, cunning, and political power without seeming overpowered or cartoonish, unlike most other characters in Bungo Stray Dogs. So, that begs the question as to how he was ruined so easily in the span of one dreaded episode, or rather, in a 30-second span. Well, to answer that question, Season 5, Episode 5. Jouno is recruited into the Decay of Angels by Fukuchi, who determines him as the perfect fit for a plot of global domination and mass suffering. As a result, one would imagine that Jouno joins the plot and relishes in the suffering of billions, correct? A sadistic, psychopathic murderer who enjoys tormenting people is given a grand opportunity to torment humanity on a global scale. Thus, it would be logical for him, knowing his character up to that point, to agree to this plan, right? Well, you'd be an idiot to think so, at least according to Kafka Asagiri, the mangaka. Right as Fukuchi explains this plan to him, and right after a flashback is shown with Jouno tormenting the aforementioned bank robbers, another flashback ensues where he is praised and thanked by the victims of the robbery. Then, somehow, Jouno's entire attitude changes and states the following.
これはあなたのミスです、隊長。あなたは私に教えてしまった。無辜なる民を守ること、その優越。それに比べれば、誰かの悲鳴など無音に等しい。
Alright, I'm gonna go a bit off on a tangent here, but this is just really stupid. It's a complete betrayal of the character who was established up to that point. You don't just suddenly turn a bad guy good with one 30-second flashback, alright? As mentioned earlier, it'd be like if Hans Landa at the end of Inglourious Basterds decided, you know what, I don't want to kill Jews anymore, I want to help the Americans and I'm gonna kill Hitler. So it's just really stupid. Afterwards, Jouno then fights Fukuchi while revealing to the audience that he had the girl whom he was tormenting earlier follow him into the discreet room. Jouno and Fukuchi fight. Fukuchi wins because he can use a space-time warping sword that somehow catches fire. I really don't know how that works. And Jouno's turned into a vampire. From here, Jouno's whereabouts are unknown since both the anime and the manga have ended at the same place along with a massive cliffhanger. I genuinely don't see how this is a viable excuse to turn Jouno against Fukuchi. It's like the mangaka was just writing a stream of consciousness and drew the first thing that came to mind in order to turn Jouno against Fukuchi without taking into account the core of his own characters. Now, it's been a while since I've seen the first 3 seasons, so my memory might be hazy, but I genuinely don't remember this occurring at all to any other characters so suddenly. Even Tachihara, who was somewhat insignificant before the 5th season, was given enough background and motivation to change like he did, in spite of him not finishing his own quest for vengeance, which is another weakness in the writing. Regardless, such a sudden change in character for Jouno is insulting all around. The character, the audience, and even the mangaka himself, as it proves to us that the mangaka is not even confident in his own writing or capability to change characters. It also is insulting to the character because it's a complete betrayal to him, and it's insulting to the audience because we're just supposed to expect this slosh being spoon-fed to us. Jouno is a fine character with a lot of potential to grow, but obviously Kafka Asagiri recognized that he was too strong for the villains to keep around. Thus, he had to invent a reason at the last second to get rid of him. It would have been preferable for Jouno to take out Fukuchi in order to usurp the leadership of the hunting dogs. As a psychopath and a sadist, Jouno is someone who obsesses with controlling people, so it makes sense that he would betray his own leader in order to assume control over the hunting dogs unit and enact his own plot of dominance. Then Fukuchi would have a reason to kill Jouno, or at least turn him into a vampire, as a sudden tertiary force who opposes both sides of this battle. Nevertheless, what Kafka Asagiri has bestowed upon this world is mediocre writing that rivals that of George Lucas with the prequels. Entertaining and good, or sometimes even great and complex ideas mixed with an overabundance of sloppy writing in order to progress the story. While my criticisms of Bungo Stray Dogs are far from over, I will leave that to another video once I have the patience and courage to re-watch the earlier seasons in order to critique them fairly. Of course, if you like the show, that's fine. I enjoy plenty of aspects and elements in the show, but I also recognize the plentiful amount of shortcomings and how those have trumped any potential enjoyment from these past 2 seasons, which for some reason have been hyped up for years as being amazing by manga readers. But to each their own. Thanks for watching the video, subscribe, and see you later.